All right, welcome to another episode of Life Matters, where we discuss the matters of life because we believe that your life truly does matter. Mm-hmm. To my left, we have Pastor John, we have Pastor Dale. These are our elders here at church, and I'm your host and facilitator, Pastor Devon. When we first talk about our opening question, we had a couple of responses like, hey, let's talk about openers. And the opening question that I think now would be good for us to think about is, what is the worst injury or the injury that has stuck with you the most?
So I'm going to go with what I thought was the worst wasn't the stuff that stuck with me the most.
Okay.
So like one of my worst was I got a little bit of a scar still here from it as a reminder. I tried skateboarding when I was a kid. I tried one time very unsuccessfully, and I didn't know how to turn or really go straight fast, and so I ended up having to bail out and ended up like losing all the skin right here. And so it was the worst maybe in the moment, but it healed. It healed really, like it was a painful process in the moment, but it healed.
I'm sorry, Dale, did you say nice?
That's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
That's that empathy right there.
Yeah.
Probably the one that stuck with me the most is either my knee or my ankle. Maybe my ankle, attempting to play basketball. Probably the worst time was the last time I attempted to play basketball, and it was a church outreach, and I went for a layup, and I was going for a rebound, and I tried to get the ball, and I thought I jumped higher than I did, and I realized I don't jump nearly as high as I used to, and I never really jumped all that high. And I landed on my ankle sideways, and it popped, and it swelled up pretty big. And I will never forget this little boy that was out at the park. He comes and he hovers over me, and he is like, "It don't hurt that bad. Get up."
Yeah. Wow.
And I was like, somebody move this child.
Actually, that was at the park, right?
Yeah.
No, I do remember that. That's good. That's good stuff.
That's great.
And so that one still throbs and hurts on occasion.
Nice.
So.
Before you go, Dale, for me, it was about a couple months before my wedding. I was working at Chick-fil-A at the time, and when I'm working there, I was working over the fry station, putting waffle fries out for everybody, and the grease popped up. It was 400 degrees hot, and I remember putting the fry basket down. The grease kind of popped up, and it hit me on my arm here, right there on my scars, a little scar right there, and then some of it got on my face. And I remember a bad scab coming across my eye, and I was just praying, "Oh no,
be gone,
be gone before the wedding, be gone before the wedding, be gone." And thankfully, it did heal up. So I think about that. I thought it was gonna be worse than I intended it for me, but I'm glad that it did not happen.
There you go. Your face looks great.
Yeah, thank you.
Funny enough, I have so many, but I'm just gonna bring it back down to the one that stuck with me the most, and it stuck with me the most because of who did it and how it came about. I have this big scar here down the. I'm sure the camera can't see it, but it goes all the way down from my knuckle all the way to my other knuckle.
Nice.
And nice. But the funny part is, this is the scar from the doctor. So the injury actually was this tiny little scar that is almost unnoticeable. But it was a nail that went in while I was framing with my grandfather, and I was being a good grandson and holding the wood. And he managed to get the nail to slide across the wood into my finger, which I would just say so that you understand how tough
people are like
I am.
turning this off now.
I pulled it out, and I continued to work. It didn't hurt that bad, but that night it got infected and began to throb. So that's how the other scar came about.
And had to get it dealt
with, and it was horrible. So.
Wow. Okay, so we talked about our injuries.
Yeah.
Injuries that we think have stuck with us, or the worst ones that have come to mind. But then, here's why we talk about those things. Because in this episode, we want to talk about an important topic, a topic where we believe that will resonate with the church. And actually, it involves the church. This episode is called Church Hurt.
Yep.
The topic we're talking about. So we're talking about injuries that have happened in the church, whether it's spiritual, emotional, or even perhaps physical. And I just want to give a caveat here that we cannot cover everything in a short amount of time. This cannot be all encompassing, but what we do hope to happen in this episode is that we hope that there is going to be restoration for your souls here, that we can point you to principles in the scripture, and even examples throughout the Bible where we can see where God has acknowledged this and what God has done because of this epidemic or pandemic that's happening in church hurt. So as we talk about this word church hurt, this phrase, guys, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? What jumps out at you, or what are some things that you have heard from other people when you think about this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I would start off with just who we are as a church. One of our focuses, goals, stated desires is to reach unchurched people. And what we mean by that is people who either have never been a part of a church, maybe they're not believers, or people who are believers that have been disconnected from the church. And often that is a result of what we would refer to as church hurt. And kind of, I think as we just describe that concept, it is people who have experienced physical, emotional, spiritual trauma within the confines of what we would call the church. Not always from believers, and I want to be clear on that, because the church is the gathering of believers, but there are often people who aren't believers or aren't faithful to it that gather together as well. And so sometimes these things are a result of people being together. Sometimes it's something that somebody intentionally did. Often it's times that nobody did anything intentional. And so as I think through church hurt, it's not just like there's this one thing. Right. I think there's layers. It kind of like when we talk about our injuries, like there's more minor bumps and scratches, and there are those major things that are going to stick with you, and they're going to throb and they're going to hurt in times. And understanding, most importantly, how do we deal with it? How do we respond to it? So that's kind of like where I would start out, kind of thinking.
On top of that, as we continue down that road of the injuries, there's also the ones that you can clearly see, that like mine, that I have scars all over my hands from, and then the ones like yours that are very internal.
Yeah.
And so, as you said earlier, like physical, emotional, and spiritual, like they're different, and yet they're all a type of hurt. And so when I think of it, I think a lot of just through the centuries, the ways that different people have been hurt by people claiming to be the church.
Right.
While I also recognize that sometimes we get a little bit carried away.
And sometimes people who genuinely are a part of the church. I mean, church hurt happens to a lot of people. And like you said, sometimes it's something that other people might not see. Just walking up here, talking about physical injuries, my knee was just throbbing. I don't know why. I don't particularly even know what's going on with it.
Nice.
Other than
that's gonna be the way.
Just carry that.
You're welcome.
Other than I'm just getting old. I think that's all that it is. But but it also was something where it's like, okay, I could just stop here on the stairs and like cease to exist, or I can figure out how to get past this. Yeah. And I think that's one of the hopes in this episode is that we have people who maybe they've experienced church hurt, or maybe it's just this general concept. I mean, what a buzzword right now. I want to be careful in saying this. Everything is called church hurt now. Like somebody like looks at you in a weird way, and you're like church hurt, or like somebody helps you to see that there's something that's not right in your life. People like church hurt, and so I do want to be careful in this that we don't start looking for the boogeyman around every corner. It's kind of discussion we had just a few minutes ago before we started. Is that there are times where people are kind of looking for the boogeyman, looking to be hurt.
In this episode, I do want to say, because I think what you guys are expounding on is really true. There's church hurt that happens that is intentional, and some that happens that is unintentional. And there's structural problems in the church where there's just miscommunication that happens and there's no clarity, and people can take that and start to run with a narrative, or there's something that has legitimately happened where we try to cover in all our next gen ministries where we don't want to see abuse happens in those things. We don't want to see those things happen. But in this episode we're talking about, we need to talk about the main thing, which is if you've been in the church at all, or if you're around people at all your life, you're either going to be the one who offended somebody or unintentionally. You're offended by somebody or you have unintentionally offended somebody. So this is good to see that. that if we're flawed people living in a flawed world, now we are redeemed in the image of our Creator.
That's right.
But yet, we do see that, hey, we have to be mindful of that sinful nature that's in us. That when we kind of bump with each other, like, hey, well, I mean, what's the cliche? Hurt people. People say, right? But, I mean, it's cliche, but it is true, though. Like,
well, and within that, I think we have to be careful in that if we're not, unintentionally, we seem to sometimes create this narrative, like, church people are bad.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I've heard the expression over and over, like, church is full of hypocrites, you know, and stuff like that. And we'll say stuff like that. I'm like, hopefully not. Hopefully the majority of the church, and I believe about Life Church, that it's not full of a bunch of hypocrites. It's full of imperfect people. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that the average church should be full of hypocrites. There are going to be people who are hypocritical, and hopefully those are moments, not lifestyles of it. So I think we have to be careful in saying, like, oh, when you come in, it's just a bunch of people and we're all just like knocking each other down. I'd say the vast majority of what you should experience in the church, at least in a healthy church, I believe what people will primarily experience here is being lifted up, being encouraged, being loved on. But I think when we go too far down that other road of saying, like, hey, church is full of hypocrites and people who are constantly making mistakes and constantly hurting people, I think what happens is, and this was part of our discussion earlier, some people might come in and be looking and expecting to get hurt, because what they hear is, you know, people are going to judge you and you just kind of have to get over it. And at least when people come in, I don't think that is the norm. You know, I can at least speak to here at Life Church, but I think for the church as a whole, I don't think the average Christian is a judgy, like, angry, just mean person. I think the average person who has genuinely experienced Christ is loving, forgiving, you know, just as we know that Christ forgave us. There's so much more that we come into it, as Paul challenges us to do, considering others is more important than ourselves.
Philippians 2.
Yeah. I think psychologically, a lot of times, because of our selfish nature, and obviously if we're saved, we're not completely in it, but it's still there. And so I think a lot of times what can happen is our mind can allow us to be the victim in order to make us feel better about what we do have going on in our lives. And I think that's where some of this hypocritical stuff comes in, of like, man, we need somebody to point at. But between that and you have other scenarios like, you know, the life that I've lived prior to getting saved and coming into the church, when people are still looking at that, they're like, oh, you're a hypocrite. And it's like, no, I've just changed. I'm just a different person.
That's the power of the gospel.
Yeah. That's good. No, it's beautiful. It reminds me of what the apostle or disciple, as we know him, Peter, what he said in his letter to the first epistle of Peter in chapter 2, he says, get rid of all hypocrisy, get rid of all slander. And he starts going through this beautiful picture when he says, even at the end of that whole chapter, when he says, hey, you're a holy priesthood, you're a royal nation. And it says that you have been called out of marvelous nation. You're in this marvelous light of the Creator now, of Jesus. And you are there to praise and to proclaim the excellence of his mercies. And when he mentions that, that's really is a command. Get rid of all of it. It shouldn't be there.
I like that. It being a command to seek out in ourselves being purified by the gospel, but also to be healed amongst other believers. And you know, Paul talks over and over and over about the unity of the body of the church. And sometimes in some of his letters, you know, I laugh where he's like, he'll call out specific things. He'll be like, hey, this person's creating disunity. Stop it. Quit. And you know, I think that we do need to be guarded. We do need to protect the unity of the body. And one of the ways to do that is to call people to expect unity in the body. And so what that means is there are going to be times where somebody hurts my feelings or somebody bothers me, and I have to evaluate in those moments, kind of like a wound, how do I treat this? And sometimes it doesn't need to be the other person. Sometimes somebody does something unintentionally, and let's be honest, I need to just forgive them and move on. I need to just kind of let some things go. You know, maybe I need to recognize when I'm just being sensitive. You know, sometimes I just need to sleep on something. But like, I think it comes from, I have to have a desire and a want that I see when my brother or sister offends me, especially unintentionally, that I view them as more important than myself. That doesn't mean that I don't care about myself in any way, or that I'm just gonna have like slander just like thrown on me, but that I view them as more important myself, and I view the unity of the body as more important than a little skirmish that I kind of want to have or want to feel or kind of be elevated in myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I think of because to your point of unintentional, I think of my kids. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes my kids will be outside playing, and one of them will accidentally bump into another one. That one will fall and scrape their knee, and they'll come in, and what do they say? They don't say, "Oh, they accidentally bumped me and I fell on the ground." They knocked me over. They hurt me. You know, and I have to be like, okay, so what happened?
Right.
And like walk them through this of like, but it was an accident. It was unintentional. They weren't maliciously trying to hurt you. Y'all were playing. You were having a good time. You were together in unity, and something accidental happened, and now there's disunity, and you want to see them be punished for something they didn't try to do.
No, preach, brother. It's good.
Well, and I think even in that, it's when within the church sometimes we start to view things as like, this is my thing. This is my area, my ministry, my way to do stuff. And when we start to see anything in the church as mine, and we miss out on it's all God's. It is It's all for His glory and His honor. And so like any role that I play in it is one, so easily replaced by the Father. And two, it's only to His glory, not to mine, not to my benefit. And so when we start to see things as mine, then I think it lends ourselves to get hurt more easily. And I do want to be careful, because I think as we're talking about this, not all hurt is unintentional.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Because I don't want to discount. Somebody might be listening and thinking like, well, I had this person do this like terrible thing to me, and I don't want to overlook that, because there are times where there's a legitimate hurt that maybe does take somebody away from a local body of believers, or you find out that like a person within that body wasn't truly representative of Christ and salvation in their own heart and life, but not to give up on it. Right. When we talk about physical injuries, one of the things I wasn't sure if you were going to go here with your first day here on staff.
Oh wow! Yes.
Tell that story.
Yes, that's right. My first day on staff, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend, or we were about to come up with Thanksgiving. Anyway, we had a luncheon, and I was taking the trash out at the church, and I was getting ready to go to the dumpster, and as I'm throwing the trash bag into the dumpster, there's a big giant can of green beans. There's not green beans in the can, but there's a green bean can, and what it was like, it cut through the bag and it slid through my thumb. And
people are gonna hate this episode.
Nice, right? And I actually saw, like, okay, that's blood, and then I saw beads coming. I was like, beads? What are beads? And then my wife, my girlfriend at the time, Kia, she says, we gotta go to the hospital. And she took me to the hospital, and I had to get stitches in there. And that very well could have said, my story could have been, I'm not coming back.
Right.
This is not at all.
No, I was, because that's why it made me laugh, because it was not then. I was very concerned for you then. But looking back on it, that was your first day on staff, and I was like, man, this did not start off well. And on the other side, I was like, woo, workers' comp.
Yes, that's true. That's true too.
But to the point, like, you didn't give up on the church, even with a physical injury, and you recognize, like, it would have been easy, like, oh, why'd somebody put this in here and try to figure out, like, somebody to blame, right? And I think that's what we want so often. We want someone to blame, and some of the things that we experience are because we're in a broken world, that sin exists, and the devil wants to do what he can to infiltrate our minds, our hearts, so that we get distracted from the mission of the gospel. And so even like a physical injury like that it didn't stop you, and years later now, you're a single guy dating at the time, now you're a married guy with kids, you're a pastor of the church, and impacting people with the power of the gospel in a way that wouldn't have been possible if you're just like, man, I don't want to do something where all of a sudden I'm going to expect that every day is going to be getting cut by a can of green beans.
Wow. Yeah.
That's not the norm. And I think being able to recognize, okay, this isn't the norm, I need to deal with this. I needed to heal. I needed to be treated. And I think when it comes to hurt, obviously, maybe it's some things require counseling.
Yep.
Some things require like sitting down and talking with the other party involved or parties involved. Sometimes it's some sort of mediation, like just sitting down and trying to consider the perspectives, especially in unintentional hurt.
Right.
Consider the perspectives of somebody else. But with the goal, and I think that's where we have to keep coming back to, with the goal of healing.
Well, to that point, I mean, we started off with the whole physical injuries. You wouldn't cut yourself. If say like when I had that and I just been like, you know what, it'll heal on its own, I would have probably died eventually because it was infected.
Yeah, that's good.
But like, you don't just sit in your injury, like you want it to be healed. And so if we know that about physical injuries, then we should want the same thing for emotional and spiritual. We want to find the way to bandage it, the way to heal it, the way to take care of it. I mean, with this, I had to take a couple weeks off and like sit with a bandage on it, let it heal from the inside out. It was just the way that it had to be taken care of. While this one, I just got stitches and wrapped it up and continued on. It's different injuries require different solutions, different healing.
That's good.
We shouldn't expect the same thing. Or okay, this injury did this, so God, you need to heal it this exact way.
Right.
No, like God can choose how to heal injuries in our lives.
And sometimes that healing process is painful. And I think that's one, like I'm sure you did not enjoy that.
Don't preach that. That's good. That's good.
I will quickly share. They stacked galls into this thing.
Don't scare everybody off in the audience with
Nice.
I'll put it simply then. They stacked galls in, and the most painful thing I've ever felt in my entire life was pulling the galls out. They told me how to do it gently, but there was no such thing. Dude, they either were really bad at their job or I was really bad at listening to instructions. I don't know.
Probably.
Yes. The answer is yes.
But I mean, I do think that's one of the reasons people don't heal often is because it's painful sometimes to heal because you have to open it up. You got to work through it. I mean, I know as we talk about church hurt, I think we can almost get under the assumption that church hurt is something that happens to just people in the congregation. Church hurt happens to pastors. And like, the hard thing about church hurt that happens to a pastor, and I'm not saying like please don't like feel sorry for us or anything like that. There's nothing like that. But I think to overlook the idea that like, man, when I pour into somebody's life, love on them, there for them, and like something negative happens in that relationship, it hurts. It hurts. I've had people who have said things about me or genuinely thought things about me, about my personality, my motivations, anything like that, and those things genuinely hurt. I mean, like I say, I'm not a crier much, but there have been many times where I have just wept in my home and wept with my wife over things that happened in the church. Just being completely honest, there were times where I wanted to give up on it, where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. This hurts. I want to protect myself and pull away from this thing because I don't want to get hurt again. And one of the things that we often say in our home is like, we can't do our jobs effectively. Like, I can't pastor this church effectively. Our family can't pour into the church effectively if we're not continually putting ourselves into a place where we're vulnerable enough that we could get hurt again.
Can we speak about that just for a second? Okay. Because I know some people will hear that and think that, well, that's foolish. Why would you do that over and over again just for, if you know that possibility could happen, why do that again and again? And do I go ahead?
Insanity.
Hopefully that's not the answer.
Just kidding.
But maybe I am. No, but I think it's a great question. And here's why, because I think the reward is worth the risk.
That's it. Okay.
Like, we live in a world that once something shows any sign of wear or tear, any sign of brokenness, we just throw out the whole thing. We're very much so in a world that like we don't fix stuff, we buy something new.
Oh wow, yeah.
And let's take that. I know this episode is on church hurt, but like let's take that into marriages. How often in marriages is it when we see something that is broken, there is no attempt to fix it? And I'm not saying that's all. Like I recognize there are situations that are outside of that. I'm not suggesting every situation can be fixed in that way, but you know, my marriage is one of the greatest blessings that I have in my life. And marriage is hard. Marriage is work, and I cannot have a healthy marriage if I don't continually put myself into a position that I could get hurt. And if my wife doesn't put herself into a position that she can get hurt, I'm not talking physically. I'm talking like emotionally and spiritually, like invested into this union called marriage. But I will also say, like, because we are vulnerable with one another, and because more times than not, you know, we see the blessing of that.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we see that, oh, like, I know that Kristen has my back. She's looking at, she might not always do it perfectly, but she has my back. She's looking out for me. She knows that I've got her back, that I'm looking out for her. I might not always do it perfectly, but, and so I think within the church then, like, I can come in and know, like, I know you guys got my back. And I know that the average person in our congregation, believers, have my back, and they're there for me. And so that doesn't mean you two or anybody else in the congregation is going to always do it perfectly, but I know that's our goal, that's our desire. And so when there are hiccups there, I want to find healing, because what we get to do together is so much more beautiful than what I could do on my own.
Yeah.
To that point, if with what your question was like, well, why not? Why keep doing it? The idea, the understanding is, yeah, it hurts when one person does something against me, but to his point, there's so many more than just one person here. Yeah. If my life is dependent upon one person to make, you know, then it's, you know, when that one person hurts me, it's going to be much worse. But I'm going to be able to keep pressing on a little bit, or the closer that person is to me, to his point. You know, I have a wonderful wife here, and she is very encouraging and such. And she wasn't, and I know what that feels like. If she wasn't, then you can't. I mean, yeah, it is much worse. It is much more hurtful. And so, but having the encouragement of knowing that there is more than just, you know.
When we're unified in purpose, and I think that's the thing, for a church to understand our purpose, and our purpose is not to make us comfortable. Our purpose is we describe it as grow, love, and reach, but to draw us close to God, in community with God, to know God, and to know each other in our relationship with God, so that as we grow together, then we can effectively love God and receive his love, so that we can effectively love the people around us, and that we can then reach out to our neighbors and the nations. And I think when we understand, when we're united in purpose, it helps us to overlook the little broken parts a little bit easier. And that's not to say it's easy. Again, these are sometimes painful processes. I think it's just understanding that it's worth it. And that's not to say that every single local body, because, you know, I said we reach a lot of church people. We meet plenty of people who came from unhealthy churches. And I recognize that there are plenty of unhealthy churches, and I don't think that in all situations everybody should just be like, hey, just stick it out with this church where there is backbiting and infighting,
false doctrine.
False doctrine. Like there's a point at which, like Paul describes, you know, like you can help somebody out of the mud, but make sure you're on firm footing, that you don't fall in again. Like if your situation is you're just like getting dragged in the mud with everybody else, it's okay to step away from that. And in fact, I would actually encourage, if you can't be in a church with a good attitude, a focus on the gospel, encouragement amongst believers, if when you go to church, like your whole desire is like, I'm frustrated about something, I would say that's not the church for you. Like for whatever reason, whether it's a legitimate concern or whether, like, I would encourage people, like, if you can't find healing, yes, find another local body, but don't bring hurt there. Find healing. Don't just say, like, I'm so angry at these people. Like, you
project that experience.
You got to forgive whatever. And I think maybe this episode is so much on forgiveness because Christ forgave us when we did not deserve it. And so I hear people, well, they did this, or they did this, or they did. Okay, what have you done to God? And so there were times in my life where I had to go to people and say, I forgive you. Or I just had to, in my heart, because it wasn't going to benefit me to like go to them and say that, but in my heart. And I think describing forgiveness is not, I don't believe that the Bible ever teaches forgive and forget for us.
Right.
No, we don't become unaware of how we were hurt. And I think we're also wise to, like, if somebody has been stealing money from me, I'm probably not going to put them over my finances, right? Like
Right.
that, it would be foolish to forget that. But forgiveness is a release of debt.
Right.
And so when I can say, okay, you no longer are indebted to me. And I think one of the interesting things about forgiveness is, let's say like somebody owes me $20 and I say, okay, you're released from that debt. You no longer owe me $20. Maybe 2 weeks from now, I forget that I forgave that debt. And like, I'm like, hey, don't you owe me $20? And they're like, I thought that was forgiven. Here's the thing. Sometimes I have to be reminded. And so there might be times where maybe somebody hurt me, and then they come and I'm like, that spirit, that flesh wants to kind of come up in me and be like, oh, I want to be angry at them. I want to get even. And then I believe what happens, the Holy Spirit will say, hey, did you forgive? They're forgiven. They're out of that debt. So you don't get to hold that. That doesn't belong to you anymore. That you gave that over to God. Because if we're holding on to sin, and we know this in a real way, if we're holding on to sin, then it's creating this separation between us and God.
Yeah.
And we know that in our own sin. Okay, if I'm doing these bad things, if I'm interacting with these, here's the reality: if I'm holding on to somebody else's sin that they did against me, I'm still holding on to sin. And so I got to let go so that I can experience the fullness of God. And so maybe I need to be reminded at times, like, oh, my flesh wants to rise up, my flesh wants to get even, my flesh wants to be angry, to bring in my past into my present. And sometimes I have to remind myself, nah, that's not you.
But you have to be willing to be reminded. See, my brother.
We
younger
better be
siblings.
All right, we better be careful. I don't know if we're gonna have to edit it out.
My younger brother came to me for 2 years straight, probably, reminding me that I owed him $5. I paid him that $5, and I hope he's watching. I paid him that $5 probably 15 times before I got tired of paying that $5.
Yeah. Maybe he just had a plan, man.
Yeah. He did good off that $5.
Did you forget you owed me $5?
It's easily possible. Anyway,
we spoke on this unity part. Like, this is the goal, or what you said earlier, which I love. And the reward is greater than the risk. But that's not just something that you pull out of thin air. And we mentioned that God has forgave us in Christ. If anybody could talk about church hurt, it would be Jesus. Jesus himself came to earth, yes, was despised and rejected amongst men. And I love when Hebrews 12 gets into it. Hebrews 12 talks about that he's the author and he's the perfecter of all faith. And the beautiful part about this is he looked at the cross and he despised the shame of it. Despise, what's that mean? Like, that he pitied it? But what did he pity it for? Why did he consider the cross to be like, that's nothing compared to what? The joy of our salvation. The joy of our unity with him, the joy of our unity with God, the triune God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, so that we would be with him. So if anybody could talk about church hurt, it would be Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he did endure it. He did. He did see the cross as, this is pitiful, like, compared to what I'm going to receive and what's the suffering Savior to conquer and inherit for us. I think if anybody could talk about it, and to this point, when we talk about the Bible here and we're getting into this, what are some examples, and I mentioned Jesus already, but what are some examples that we see throughout Scripture as how to God, how does he speak to us, what does he see about this, and what are some principles that we see? So how do we apply this to our lives?
So as you were describing that, I was thinking, how does Jesus look at the church? And we're told. He looks at it as his bride. Presented to him pure and unblemished. And so I've heard it described this way, and I love this. When people are like, I love Jesus, but I hate his church.
That's
like somebody coming up to me and be like, man, John, I like you. Can't stand your wife.
Oh man.
And like, I'm not okay with that.
Haven't
right?
seen you.
Right? Like,
come see me.
I'd be like, you and I aren't going to be like best of friends if you're going to sit here and trash my wife. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And so to come to Jesus and be like, love you, your church, kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
Like, one, like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Two, what are you going to do about it? Like, if you're a believer, you are called to be a part of this thing. And so kind of that question comes up, okay, what are you doing to be a part of the purity of the body of believers? Because if Jesus said, I'm going to build this thing and the gates of hell won't prevail against it, then if we are allowing something to stop us from being a part of it, it means that we are outside of what Jesus said he was willing to do. And the church isn't going to go away. The church isn't going to stop. Now, within that, of course, not every place that calls themselves a church is a church.
All right.
Right.
You know, I think we got to be careful there. There are a lot of false doctrines, false churches, false teachers. Bible goes abundantly through that. We don't have time to get into all that in today's episode. But there's so much that is false, that is not genuine. But the church, and by that I mean genuine believers in Christ who are submitted to him, that's not going away. Communing together for the carrying out of his gospel and growing together in faith in him. That's not going away. And so to trash talk the church is somewhat to trash talk Jesus. To say, yeah, Jesus, I know you can do these powerful things, but I don't think you can actually do what you said you're going to do in the church. I don't think it's really as healthy as you say it's going to be. And don't get me wrong, like, I get frustrated with certain things that happen within churches and denominations at times, but man, I'm not ready to turn my back on any of that, because I believe that what Jesus promised is true.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, what just came to my mind is something I got to preach on just not too long ago, and Jesus essentially is telling the experts of the law. He says, "Hey, look, y'all are responsible for the deaths of the prophets." And so, like, when I was thinking about what you were saying, Jesus is easily the most important example of church hurt.
Yeah.
Wow, all the prophets. Paul and there we could flip through this entire Bible and come up with all these examples of church hurt. And one of the things I think is interesting is I think that we think that somehow we're different than the people in the Bible, as if like the rules that were here are no longer exist and like we're different. But to your point of like almost to usurp the authority from Jesus of saying like, hey, I'm good with you, Jesus, but I'm not good with your church. That is your command. You commanded us to do this church thing, to do this unity thing, and I'm not okay with that. I'm okay with you, but not okay with you. It's to usurp that authority. And Jesus says to these experts in the law, he says, hey, look, you are guilty of killing the prophets. And the reason he says that is because you are doing the same thing they did. That's how we got here.
Well, even, as you mentioned Paul there, Paul had a unique love for the church.
Yep.
New Testament, he's traveling around. He is helping to build this thing out, plant churches, local bodies, part of the whole church in different cities. And when we read his letters, to the Corinthians or the people of Thessalonica or Philippi or Ephesus or wherever he's writing to, one of the things that jumps out is, even though there are plenty of times where he is like, hey, get it together. And he'll call out where there's something that's unhealthy. There is this unique affection. It really jumps off the pages in Philippi. But all the letters he writes, there is this unique affection that he has. Sometimes it's an affection to call people to get things right. Sometimes it's an affection to just affirm what they're doing that is really, really good. But here's the thing. In pretty much every single one of those cities, I'm trying to run through them all in my head. I can't think of one that he doesn't at some point get chased out of town from. Right?
Sometimes stoned.
Right.
Yeah.
And even if you're like, oh, that's just the culture around him, the only letter that I can think of that Paul doesn't have to deal with some issue that is frustrating him within the church is Philippi. That the letter to the Philippians is the only letter that I can think of where Paul doesn't explicitly deal with some problem that is within the church, whether he's writing a leader in the church or whether he's writing the church as a whole or he's writing to a group of churches. Every time he writes, he has this unique affection, and yet even within that affection, he's going to say, hey, you're still not getting it all right. And not to make an excuse from that, he's like, oh, let's grow in godliness.
Yeah.
Let's grow together. Let's figure this thing out because it's worth it. And from there, we see, he goes to Rome. He helps plant a church in Rome, and his church in Rome looks really weird because he's kind of leading it from prison. and he's like, man, this thing's great. This thing's great. I mean, we're still figuring it out, but what happens is the gospel starts to grow and eventually goes out throughout the Roman Empire, and that's where we see the expansion of faith in Jesus really begin to go out to the true ends of the world. And why for so many of us today that we have access to the truth of the gospel, because Paul so believed that the church was worth it, and that the gospel was worth it, and that the church was the avenue through which the gospel would spread.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm thinking about that fun fact now. I mean, besides Philippians 4, it's the teaching in Eudonia. I mean, even then, he's calling two people out specifically.
Right.
But other
you're right.
But other than that, which lets us know that fighting for unity is the goal.
Yeah.
But, man, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. We see Paul, that was his heart so much, is like the gospel, and you can't separate. I think that's why the unity of the church shows up so much in his letters, is because he doesn't separate the expansion of the gospel from the health of the church. And so for a church to be healthy, then that means when there is hurt, we need to heal past it. And so if there's somebody that is coming into a church and there's healing that needs to take place, then allow that healing. Like, heal from your past. Heal from what has happened. And maybe you need to sit down and talk with somebody. Maybe counseling needs to take place. Maybe just like humility before God, just to say, okay, God, like I'm not going to get all the answers that I want, but I need to let go of this thing, so that we don't come in looking for somebody to offend. Because here's the thing, I think it's kind of that old adage, like if I'm looking for a purple car, then I'm going to see a purple car.
I get a new car and you ride around.
Right. All of a sudden you see all the people that you have the same car as you, and you never noticed them before.
Right.
I think if we're looking for reasons to get hurt, we will find them. If I go in on Sunday and I'm like, oh, I'm in a bad mood and I'm going to find that person who just looks at me in a weird way. Maybe they just have gas and they're just like, they're just like, they're just like, I gotta find a bathroom, and like, but I take it and I'm like, they looked at me in a weird way. If we're looking for offense, we're gonna find it. And so that's why I keep coming back to that, like, consider others as more important than yourself. Because, man, it's hard. It's hard if I see somebody as more important than myself. That's why we get along with guests so well often. We get along with people we don't know sometimes better than the people we know the best. Why? Because when you're treating somebody as a guest, you're treating them in an elevated way. It's better than yourself. You're like, oh, let me go out of my way to let me vacuum.
It's
up
the first impression. Yeah.
Right. And then when we get to know somebody really well, all of a sudden we're like, yeah, but what about me? And that's why within families, I'm going to have more arguments within my family than I am with strangers. But man, I love my family. I love my family in a unique way that strangers don't have that intimacy. And so if we're just like, oh, within the church, you're going to have division and those things are going to happen. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to always see eye to eye. That's when we go and we gather together in prayer and say, okay, God, move us out of the way so that we can see you in your glory.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like I said, I'm glad that we was able to cover this topic of church hurt. And if you have any more questions, you just email us or actually come talk to us. We'd love to do kind of like a recurring series probably on this, maybe.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there are several resources that talks about this. And we'll be glad to share that with you all. But for now, it's time to go. As always, Life Church, please, please, please go to your mission field.